Jonathan was a 32-year-old man, once hailed as one of the greatest singers and songwriters of his generation. His brown hair already showed some grey strands at the temples, a reflection not only of age, but also of the stress that fame had brought him. His green eyes, once bright and full of life, now carried a melancholic tone, as if they had lost their sparkle along with his musical inspiration. On that Friday night, Jonathan arrived home exhausted and irritable. The dinner with his producer and manager had been yet another frustrated attempt to convince him to resume his musical career. Upon entering, Jonathan went straight to the living room. He turned on the sophisticated sound system and let the melodic notes of jazz fill the room. Then he headed to the private bar in the corner of the room, picking up a bottle of red wine and a glass. Sitting on the leather sofa, Jonathan reflected on his team's insistence. They didn't understand that his inspiration had vanished, along with his mother's last breath 3 years ago. Since then, the melodies that once flowed so easily seemed to have dried up, leaving only a creative void. As the night wore on and the level of the wine bottle decreased, Jonathan felt the weight of expectations on his shoulders. The fame that had once been his constant companion now seemed like a distant and unwanted shadow. His thoughts drifted between memories of packed shows and intimate moments with his mother, his biggest fan and critic. Without realizing it, Jonathan ended up falling asleep on the sofa, lulled by the soft music and the effect of the alcohol. The silence of the early morning was broken by the sharp sound of an alert on his phone. Still sleepy and confused, he picked up the device, noticing that it was a warning from the house security system. Checking the cameras through the app on his phone, Jonathan had to blink several times to make sure he wasn't experiencing hallucinations caused by the wine. On the small bench in the entryway of his house, there lay a woman dressed as a bride. Intrigued and a bit apprehensive, Jonathan stood up, staggering slightly. He approached the door, hesitated for a moment, and then opened it. The soft creak of the door startled the woman awake. She sat up quickly, her eyes wide with surprise and a little fear. Jonathan stood there, observing her for a few seconds. The woman was young, probably in her early 20s. Her wedding dress, though slightly wrinkled, was clearly haute couture. Her blonde hair was partially loose from the elaborate hairstyle, and her makeup was a bit smudged, as if she had been crying. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Jonathan asked, his voice hoarse from sleep and drink. The woman stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed out her dress. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do. My name is Jenna," she replied, her voice shaky. I ran away from my own wedding." Jonathan blinked, trying to process the information. "You ran away from your wedding and decided to sleep on the porch of my house?" Jenna let out a nervous laugh. "Sounds crazy, doesn't it? I was wandering aimlessly around the city. I didn't want to go back home, and I no longer trusted my friends. This bench seemed like a safe place to rest for a bit." Something in Jenna's vulnerability touched Jonathan. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, normally I wouldn't do this, but you seem to need help. Do you want to come in and tell me what happened?" The relief on Jenna's face was visible. "I would be very grateful. I promise I'm not a crazy person or anything like that." Jonathan opened the door wider, allowing Jenna to enter. He guided her to the living room, offering her a place on the sofa. "So why exactly did you run away from your wedding?" Jonathan asked, sitting in an armchair opposite. Jenna took a deep breath, her hands clasped in her lap. "I found out that my fiancé cheated on me, and the worst part is that everyone knew, my parents, my friends. Everyone wanted to cover it up so the wedding would happen anyway." Jonathan frowned. "That's terrible. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Jenna said softly. "I just couldn't go through with it." So when everyone was busy with the final preparations, I slipped out the back of the church and started walking. I don't even know how long I walked until I got here. Jonathan looked at the clock. It was already past 3 in the morning. "Well, it's very late, or very early, depending on the point of view. Do you have somewhere to go?" Jenna shook her head. "Not really. I don't want to go back home now, and as I said, I don't trust my friends anymore. Jonathan hesitated for a moment. The whole situation was unusual and even a bit comical. Maybe it was the effect of the alcohol still in his system, but he found himself saying, "Look, I have a guest room. You can stay there tonight if you want. Tomorrow, with a clearer mind, you can decide what to do." Jenna's face lit up with gratitude. "Really? That would be wonderful. Thank you so much." "Jonathan," he introduced himself. "You can call me Jonathan." After showing Jenna the guest room and providing some more comfortable clothes for her, Jonathan went to his own room. Lying on his bed, he reflected on how surreal that night had been. Finding a runaway bride at his door was not something that happened every day. With that thought, he finally fell asleep. The next morning, Jonathan woke up to the aroma of fresh coffee and something cooking. Confused, he went downstairs and headed to the kitchen. There was Jenna wearing the clothes he had lent her, preparing what looked like a full breakfast. "Good morning," she said cheerfully when she saw him. "I hope you don't mind. Since you weren't waking up, I thought it would be nice to make breakfast as a way of saying thank you." Jonathan, still a little groggy, nodded. "No, it's fine. Thank you." It was then that he noticed a message on his phone. It was from his housekeeper informing him that she was sick and wouldn't be able to work that week. Jenna, noticing Jonathan's worried expression, asked, "Is something wrong?" "My housekeeper is sick and won't be coming this week," he replied, running his hand across his face. Jenna hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Look, I know this might seem strange, but if you need someone to take care of the house and cook, I could do that. I just ask if I can stay a few more days here while I figure out what to do with my life." Jonathan looked at her, intrigued. For some reason he couldn't explain, he found himself sympathizing with Jenna. "All right," he heard himself saying. "We can try this." The day went surprisingly well. Jenna proved to be an excellent cook, preparing a delicious lunch. Jonathan was increasingly intrigued by this mysterious woman who had appeared in his life so unexpectedly. During lunch, Jenna began to talk a little more about herself. "You know, I was raised to be the perfect wife," she said with a touch of irony in her voice. "Educated in the best schools, I learned to cook, sew, take care of the house and children. My parents ensured that I had the right friendships, and within this restricted circle found a fiancé. They just didn't prepare me to accept marrying a scoundrel. I wasn't going to accept living that way." The tone of venting mixed with indignation, coming from such a delicate woman, sounded a bit amusing to Jonathan, who couldn't help but smile. That afternoon, while Jonathan was in his office reviewing family photos and from his heyday, he heard a sound coming from the living room. It was a soft and skillful melody being played on the piano. Intrigued, he went over and found Jenna sitting at the instrument, her fingers dancing gracefully over the keys. Noticing Jonathan's presence, Jenna smiled. "Yes, I also play the piano, another of the skills my parents deemed necessary to find a good and distinguished husband," she explained, without stopping playing. Jonathan sat in the chair next to her, picking up the guitar resting on a nearby stand. "You play very well," he commented. "Thank you," Jenna replied. Then she looked at him with curiosity. "I know who you are. I used to follow your music. What happened that you disappeared from the spotlight?" Jonathan looked away, strumming a few notes on the guitar. "It's a long story," he said without elaborating on that painful subject. Realizing it was a delicate matter, Jenna didn't press further. Instead, she began to play a gentle melody, which Jonathan recognized as one of his old songs. Without noticing, he started accompanying her on the guitar. Soon the two were improvising, creating a new melody. Jenna began to hum a few random lines, and Jonathan joined her. The words that emerged seemed to tell a bit of each of their stories, expressing feelings they both carried inside. Time went unnoticed as they played. When they finally stopped, it was already night. Jenna prepared something light for them to eat, and they sat down at the table. There was a comfortable silence between them, as if words were unnecessary. After the meal, as if pulled by an invisible force, they both returned to the instruments. This time, Jonathan had a notebook in his hands. As the music flowed, both the melody and the lyrics, he wrote frantically. As the chords flowed and the glasses of wine were slowly emptied, the early morning hours progressed without Jonathan and Jenna realizing it. The room, illuminated only by the soft glow of a lamp, seemed to witness the creation of something special. Jonathan was frantically scribbling in a notebook resting on the arm of the sofa, while Jenna, with her eyes closed, let the music guide her. When they finally reached the end, Jonathan set the guitar aside and looked at Jenna, who was still playing the final chords on the piano. "That's it," he said, with a satisfied smile and a spark in his eyes that hadn't been seen in a long time. Jenna smiled back, exhausted but fulfilled. In the days that followed, Jonathan's house, once quiet and filled with melancholy, transformed into a vibrant space where musical notes constantly echoed. In the mornings, Jenna would make coffee, while Jonathan, still half asleep, strummed chords on his guitar. Afternoons were marked by intense songwriting sessions. Jonathan, sitting on the living room floor with the guitar in hand, let himself be carried away by melodies that flowed like a river, while Jenna contributed with lyrics and harmonies that seemed to capture the essence of their shared emotions. The days passed quickly, almost without them noticing. Amid occasional laughter, passionate discussions about lyrics and piano improvisations, 4 days flew by like a breeze. That morning, Jonathan woke up to the sound of Jenna's voice, humming softly. He smiled, seeing her so comfortable, as if she had always belonged to that place. However, the lightness of the moment was interrupted by the sound of Jonathan's cell phone. It was his housekeeper, informing him that she had recovered and would be returning to work the next day. Jonathan thanked her, but upon hanging up he felt a twinge of concern. It was time to face reality. Jenna would have to decide the next step of her life, and he knew that it might mean watching her leave. The thought brought a lump to his throat that he didn't expect to feel. The next morning, Jenna was ready to leave. She descended the stairs, and under her arm, carefully folded, was the wedding dress that symbolized the life she had left behind. At the front door, the same place where their paths had crossed so unexpectedly, Jonathan awaited her in silence. "So, I guess this is it," Jenna said, trying to sound firm, but her voice betrayed a slight hesitation. Jonathan, leaning against the doorframe, crossed his arms. "It's strange to think that you arrived here with that dress and now you're leaving with it. It seems symbolic, in a way." Jenna looked at the dress and let out a small melancholic laugh. "Yes, maybe it is. It's no longer a sign of who I should be, but of who I chose not to be." Her eyes met Jonathan's, and for a moment, the silence between them seemed to say more than any words. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, looking away for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "Are you sure you're ready to go? I mean, there's no need to rush. If you want to stay a few more days, you know you're welcome." Jenna smiled, a genuine smile but tinged with anticipated longing. "You've already done so much for me, Jonathan, more than I could have hoped for. Now it's time to face my life and build something new for myself." Jonathan nodded slowly, trying to hide the tightness in his chest. He knew she was right, but that didn't make the moment any easier. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me." "Yes," Jenna replied softly. With the wedding dress still in her arms, she stepped forward and hugged him. It was a firm, sincere hug, full of a gratitude that words could not express. When they parted, Jonathan opened the door and stood there as Jenna walked to the taxi, waiting for her at the entrance. Before getting in, she turned back, her eyes shining with a mix of emotions. Jonathan tried to smile, but the melancholy in his eyes was evident. "Take care, Jenna, and good luck with the new chapter of your life." With a final wave, Jenna got into the car. Jonathan stood at the door, watching until the taxi disappeared around the corner. In the days that followed, Jonathan couldn't stop playing and singing the songs he had composed with Jenna. Every note, Every word brought back the feeling of renewal and inspiration he had experienced during those days. Determined, he scheduled a meeting with his music producer. When he showed the new compositions, the reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "Jonathan, this is it. It's a bit different from your old compositions, but they're perfect," the producer exclaimed, barely containing his excitement. "Let's record in the studio as soon as possible. It will be an amazing comeback." However, Jonathan interrupted him. "Before anything else, I need to talk to my writing partner. These songs are ours, not just mine." The producer seemed surprised but nodded. Of course. Do whatever is necessary." That night, Jonathan stared at the phone number Jenna had written on the corner of a sheet of composition paper. Taking a deep breath, he finally dialed. After a few rings, Jenna's familiar voice answered. "Hello?" "Jenna, it's Jonathan," he said, feeling a wave of nervousness he hadn't expected. "Jonathan, what a nice surprise." Jenna's voice sounded cheerful on the other end of the line. "How are you?" They chatted for a few minutes, catching up on each other's news. Jenna mentioned that she had talked to her parents, making it clear that from now on, she would make her own decisions. "I'm proud of you," Jonathan said sincerely. "Listen, I'd like to talk about the songs we composed. Would you have time for a coffee tomorrow?" "Of course," Jenna responded promptly. "I'd love to." The next day, in a cozy cafe in the city centre, Jonathan explained his intention to release the songs they had composed together. Jenna was visibly excited about the idea. "That's amazing, Jonathan. I can hardly believe it," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "I want you to know that all the profits from the songs will be equally divided between us," Jonathan assured. "After all, we created this together." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The songs were recorded and released, becoming an immediate hit. The public and critics praised Jonathan's new musical direction, commenting on how his compositions seemed to have gained a new depth and emotion. During all this time, Jonathan and Jenna kept in constant contact. They talked every day, whether through calls or messages. They shared not only updates about the success of their songs, but also about their personal lives, thoughts, and feelings. As the days went by, Jonathan realized that his feelings for Jenna went beyond gratitude or friendship. There was something more, something he hadn't felt in a long time. When it came time to perform his first show after years away from the stage, Jonathan didn't hesitate to invite Jenna to play with him. To his delight, she enthusiastically accepted. The rehearsals for the show brought Jonathan and Jenna even closer. The chemistry they had when composing translated perfectly to the stage. Their eyes frequently met during the songs, and smiles were exchanged as if they shared a special secret. As they performed shows and travelled together, love blossomed naturally between them. It was as if they had known each other for years, not just a few months. They shared laughter, confidences, and of course, music. A year had passed since that unexpected night when Jonathan found Jenna dressed as a bride at his doorstep. Now she was in white again, but this time there was no escape. In an intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family, Jonathan and Jenna got married. As they exchanged their vows, both reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them there. From a runaway bride and an uninspired musician, they had transformed into life and music partners. After the ceremony, during the reception, Jonathan surprised everyone by inviting Jenna to the stage. Together they played a new song, composed especially for the occasion. The last notes of the music mingled with the guests' emotional applause. Jonathan looked at Jenna, his eyes full of love and gratitude. "Who would have thought that I would find my muse and the love of my life on a random night?" Jenna smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "And who would have thought that running away from my wedding would lead me to the man of my dreams?" They kissed, sealing not only their love, but also the promise of a life full of music and happiness. Together, Jonathan and Jenna had found the perfect harmony both in music and in love, proving that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most beautiful symphonies of life. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.